Good evening, Fernwood. It is your TV pal Neil, and it's time for some more late night variety madness with another episode of Fernwood Tonight. If you've never seen my face before, I have reacted to all of Mary Hartman, and we are continuing that tradition with Fernwood Tonight. We will watch the show together, then we will chat about it. If that sounds like it's your bag, please stick around. Today we are watching episode 10 from July 15th, 1977. Yesterday we got into some silliness, so let's take a look back. Barth and Jerry's opening banter reminded us of the Dunbar sisters and mother that we met last week, and today we are going to meet a new Dunbar, and that is Peggy. Peggy's in the studio ready to do some gymnastic tricks, but that doesn't go so well. We come back from commercial break as Garth Sr. has put Louie on the job of getting Peggy down from the rafters. And while that goes on, Barth speaks to Richard Osgood again, who is there to tell about his new plan, the No Frills Hospital. We then bring on a new guest, William W.D. Bud Prize, or Tom as he likes to be called, who is there to give us ideas about how to save water in the coming drought. When we come back from commercial break, Barth is able to ask Bud about the thing he is wearing on his chin, and Bud has to explain that he has potentially fatal underbite and that this is essentially a strap to help him get his jaw aligned. We end the show as the fire department finally shows up with the ladder, and they still haven't quite gotten Peggy down from the rafters. Everyone, yesterday was quite silly. Today is a Friday. I don't know what developments we will expect, but, well, it's time for us to step into the unexpected.
Tonight from Fernwood, Fernwood Tonight, coming to you live with your host for tonight, Mr. Barth Gimbel. Tonight, Barth's guest will be Virgil Sims, the flying daredevil of Fernwood. Dr. Emmanuel Kaczynski, anthropologist. From the Fernwood Courier, reporter Harold Clemens with some startling new ideas for tennis players. Happy Kine and the Mirth Makers. And me, I'm Jerry Hubbard. And now your host and mine, Mr. Barth Gimbel.
Hello and good evening and good night. You may have noticed at the opening of our show that the band, our house band, the Happy Kind, the Mirth Makers, sound a little thin tonight. That's because and the Mirth Makers did not show up tonight. Just Happy Kind. A lot of you probably thought even that someone was choking a cat. Nice try, Hap. Nevertheless, whatever your musical inclinations are, Happy Kind is, and the Mirth Makers have been doing some wonderful music here on the show for the past couple of weeks and doing their best to satisfy your musical palate. But tonight is just Happy Kind because and the Mirth Makers got a job playing a wedding in Akron. It's kind of nice for them. The wedding paid their expenses, includes dinner, so the guys figured, what the heck? Opportunity's knocking, so they're walking. And the Mirth Makers, as we call them, will be back tomorrow night, however, and I know that those of you who are not too fond of music will be glad to hear that. Those same people would probably also be interested in knowing where you guys are playing in the near future, where they can see you, they hear that sound of kind that sounds so fine. Someplace in the area, any place at all? You be playing around here, Happy, any place at all?
Well, not a thing now, Barth. We're going to do a dinner dance for the senior years club, but they're check bounced.
The deposit check.
So we're just cooling it.
Oh, cooling it, huh? Just a little musician talk there. That's great. Hey, I can dig it and get down on it. Oh. Yeah, I play a little bit myself. You know, since I say I do play a little bit myself, and I do, probably, certainly not a little bit too good to be called an amateur and not good enough to be called a professional, but I say not being good enough to be professional hasn't stopped a lot of people. So, hey, what would you think if you and I got together and did something, huh?
You mean like have a bite or something?
No, Hap, I was thinking more we could do a tune.
Oh, a tune.
I could play guitar, maybe you could play piano, the old 88.
Okay.
All right. Hey, Jerry, you're back. Wonderful announcing, incidentally.
Thank you very
Pronounced
much.
perfectly.
Yes, thank you.
How about B flat? I'll be going electric. This is not a toy, incidentally. Okay, it's the real thing. Yeah, I heard a lot of songs about, leaving your heart in San Francisco. Or how Rome wasn't built in a day, and things about You Take Manhattan, in Chicago where they dance with their wife and everything. But this is a song about my very dearest place. Hap, I think you know what I'm talking about, right here in Fernwood. The trees lose their leaves in Fernwood. The buildings all have eaves in Fernwood. There's Bills and Toms and Steves in Fernwood. It's the lovely sound of church bells tolling, the happy sound of grown men bowling, where people know your name down at the market, where Mexicans at restaurants don't take your car and park it. That's the Fernwood that I know, and it's just great. Fernwood, Ohio, zip code 45998. Great, Happy. Thank you very much. We'll be right back after this important word.
Beautiful.
Great, Hap. Nice try again. Everyone in America has heard of Evel Knievel and his wonderful daredevil stunts. But one of our own local friends here in Fernwood recently started to make a name for himself on the daredevil circuit. He learned the tricks of the mechanics trade actually from Charlie Hagers, who was working on Jody Troxell's car, of course, and did a pretty good job for him. He's filled your gas tanks, he's uncrumpled your fenders down at the Ace filling station, and this weekend at the Speedway, he'll be giving new meaning to the term daredevil. Please welcome Fernwood's own Virgil Sims. Come on in, Virgil.
Jerry Hubbard. How are you?
Not a motorcycle, but sit down. How you doing, Virg?
Oh, all right.
That's great. That's great. Virg, what are you on the verge of doing, actually? You're pretty well-known, renowned as your daredeviling, and I understand you're going to do something this weekend that's going to out Virgil Sims. Am I right?
Yeah, folks around Fernwood know that I've been jumping motorcycles ever since I come in from Kentucky, but I've decided I'm going to put a new wrinkle to the prune.
Ooh.
I'm going to jump something more challenging.
Well, now, what are you going to be jumping this time?
I'm going to jump motor homes.
Whoa.
I'll be the world's first mobile home daredevil.
That's something.
What do you jump with over these homes?
No, I jump the mobile homes themselves. I jump a full-size, fully equipped Winnebago.
You mean you're actually driving the motor home that does the jumping?
Well, if somebody else drove it, I wouldn't be a daredevil, would I?
And a great sense of humor to boot. I hope you have one if it doesn't work out. Pretty exciting stuff. Absolutely. Now, how did you learn to, or even come up with the idea, how did you learn to do that exactly?
Well, Barth, you've got to kind of learn by doing, because there's not a lot of people can give you advice on flying through the air in a fully equipped Winnebago.
That's for sure. You're the first, probably.
Yeah, I had to work it out mathematically.
Did that yourself?
No, boy, I went through high school with. He finished high school, and he was real good at math, and he figured it against the weight of Evel Knievel's motorcycle. It weighs about half a ton with Evel on it, and he figured that against the record jump. And your standard fully equipped mobile home weighs between 5 and 6 tons, and he figured the length of that jump, and he come up with some figures. He said, Virgil, keep it short.
Keep it short. As far as the length of the jump goes.
About the width of your hand.
About the width of your hand. So in other words, this is a very heavy vehicle you'll be experimenting with.
Oh yeah, this is your full-size, fully equipped mobile home. It's got your water bed, your dinette. It's got
You have a water bed in the
I know,
Winnebago?
I was gonna...
your toilet facility with carpeting and
Are you serious?
yeah. I keep that water bed, you know, 'cause just like any other form of entertainment, you know, your daredevil circuit's got what you call your groupies. And you can't be too awful careful, Barth. And matter of fact, I got a couple of groupies right now. There's one girl that does interiors on mobile homes, and she's done mine. She did the ceiling of mine, and it's an exact replica of the dome over in Vatican City at
You mean
Sistine Chapel.
the Sistine Chapel ceiling?
That's a beautiful picture there.
Oh,
I've
it's
seen, yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
It must have taken her hours.
Yeah, and she put a twist to it, Bart. She put instead of your cherubs and the angels, she's got the faces of boys in the pit crew.
Brings it right home.
And I imagine you, Mr. Big, is you know who?
Yeah.
must be kind of hard to live up to sometimes, I guess.
Yeah, just a
especially
little
when
bit.
you've missed. Now, tell me about the first time you tried jumping this thing. Was that fully worked out and perfectly successful?
No, that wasn't, Barth. I tell you, when I first went up there, the first ramp collapsed, and I tore through these backs.
Uh-oh.
That sucker went right through them backs, and I had a Yamaha come up through my windshield.
Whoa.
I had a Kawasaki come up through my toilet facility.
Absolutely.
And the refrigerator door tore open. And a six-pack flew all the way across.
Probably of soft drinks, in case there's any kids listening. That would be a six-pack of soft drinks.
Six-pack of Pips, yeah, soft drinks, and
yeah.
just about killed my dog.
You have a dog right in there in the...
That's
In the
right,
mole
it's
hole?
Winky. Here he is, too.
Oh, for crying out loud, I got a picture.
That's Winky the Wonder Dog.
Oh.
That's his little fireproof
Can we
suit,
see
his
this?
helmet there.
We all see this? Okay, if we can see this, you'll notice that he has on a little helmet here and kind of a jacket. That's kind of interesting. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
My goodness. Well, it certainly sounds like a dangerous hobby that you're into.
Well, it is dangerous, Barth, but I'd like to point out to all the parents out there that I'm trying not to set a bad example for the kids.
Sure.
Nor for the adults who might get their trailer home out with their wife and kids and sleep in there and try to make a jump. I think you got to put a little disclaimer in there that you have a training, you've practiced this, and it's not just a spur-of-the-moment thing where you get say, let's make a jump. Huh? The little woman sleeping through the whole thing, she'll wake up and not know what, she might go through the refrigerator door.
You know, you became mostly interested in this jumping of mobile homes, as I said before. Anything you're going to branch out into after you've successfully jumped the mobile home, what do you think's next?
I was thinking in terms of locomotives, Barth. Only thing is I can't figure out how to make them hit them little tracks again when I get on.
Yeah. Well, it's been fascinating talking to you. We'll be right back after this important word. Stay with us. Sit down. Thanks, Happy. Our next guest is an eminent anthropologist and sociologist from Southern Ohio University, right here in Southern Ohio. That's where they got the name. Why waste time on a name? That's what I say. He's been doing some studies on the causes of racial prejudice and probably about the best in the field. Please welcome Dr. Emanuel Kaczynski.
I'm Jerry Hubbard. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Well, we're pretty lucky to have you here. Doctor, can you explain a little bit about your research?
Well, Barth, America, as we all know, is famous as a melting pot. Many diverse ethnic groups have been thrown together suddenly, and this leads to bigotry and name-calling. The origins of various racial prejudices are what we are trying to put an end to and stop stereotyping once and for all.
There's probably too much of that, more than we even need.
That's up for grabs, I think. So you studied various nationalities just to find out, you know, how people become prejudiced against them. Is that it?
Exactly. All races are alike. We are all the same.
Does that apply like to the Dago also? What I'm saying is, you know, to all...
Yes, I think I
all-encompassing.
understand. Well, let us start with the Italians. After examining the bone structure of the Italians and various other people, we find the only differences between their bodies and the other races was in the knuckle and fist area.
Sure.
We found that the bones were developed broader and heavier and stronger, and we found the musculature of the upper arm and shoulder was much bigger and much better developed. The fists and arms of Italians are designed for hitting. Italians enjoy hitting.
Yeah, is this the only feature that really separates Italians from perfectly normal people?
Yes. I'd say that, and a definite tendency towards overweight. Their weight problem is probably a subconscious one, but it is harder to dispose of a body in a car trunk or a barrel if it's fat. I mean, now this is a recurring nightmare with many Italians, and it may explain all the hitting, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So in other words, fists and a desire to hit, and the large stomach and large body, really large fist, large body would be the main, the only differences between, as I said before, normal people and Italians.
Yes, and also their inability to learn English. Tests show that Italian tongues are thick at the back, you see, and this causes a strain on the throat muscles and gives them a definite tendency to speak in monosyllables and grunt a lot.
I'll be darned. What did your studies show about other groups? Why zero in just on the...
Well, that's strange you should ask, but we studied the electrocardiographs of our Jewish friends and tried to learn about the Jewish aversion to alcoholic beverages.
They don't drink a lot, do they?
No, Jewish people don't like to drink. But we...
They're afraid they'll have to pick up a tab.
Hey, why single out tab? Could be a Diet Pepsi. Could be a Diet Pepsi just as easy.
Ah, that was very funny. Yes.
Or Fresca.
No, I'm joking because we did
Nothing against tab.
Yeah.
Well,
We did have a Jewish person on the show earlier, and I think we all came to know his type of people a little better, and I think we're all a little
Absolutely.
richer for it, too.
okay.
So what did you find?
Well, all that strictly toward one side. We discovered that when Jewish people are drinking and the glass is half empty, you see, the rim of the glass comes to rest against the bridge of the nose, and the magnitude of the nose acts as an obstacle to drinking and as a deterrent.
It's not so much they don't want to drink, they simply can't drink
That's
that last time.
exactly right.
Physical problem
Can't
as
get
opposed to
to it.
mental or any religious or moral.
Okay, doctor, but how about the Irish? Now, they're known as really big drinkers. Now, how would you explain that?
Well, the Irish, you see, they drink more because they have little tiny noses, and also they are totally insensitive to embarrassment.
A wild Irish nose.
And another question, why do they wear green so much, or does it just seem that way?
No, that's a very good question. You see, the Irish are basically a bunch of bog-trotting potato farmers, and they see green grass and they figure, why fight it? You know?
Just the opposite of the Italians, of course, who would love to fight it.
Absolutely. At the drop of a pizza.
That's great. Well, very interesting. What other peoples have you studied? What have you found?
Well, the Chinese, you see. Now, this is very fascinating because you see the skin of the Chinese, and particularly in the area of the hands and the palms, is highly water resistant.
I'll be darned.
Which gives Chinese people a much higher tolerance for doing laundry.
That's fascinating. Truly fascinating.
I understand that shortly after making that study, you had to go back and restudy it again. Am I right?
Does he have to be here?
No, wait a second. What about Japs now?
Please, you are referring to the Japanese people. We studied them. We took a group of Japanese babies and put a bush in their playpen. One by one, they began pruning the bush. Actually happened. And several of them actually began trying to hide behind it. We also found that the Japanese enjoy the feel of leather and straps around their necks, which explains why they enjoy wearing cameras and binoculars.
Of course, and the little flight bags, of course, around the arm. Absolutely, you see that everywhere. I'm kind of curious, what about, let's say, well, I don't think we've touched on the Latin and Spanish people. We've had an influx of them lately. What do you think of them?
Well, you see, the Latin and the Spanish people exhibit a trait we call proximity desirability. Now, this is the need to be near others of their own kind. Now, we found that their houses are smaller, but their families are bigger, you see, and this may account for greater numbers of Latin people who live in, say, the same basement or ride all in the same old beat-up Chevy.
Doctor, these are absolutely fascinating findings, and I'm curious. I'm sure it's been a long time. How long have you been involved in these studies here?
Almost 6 months.
6 months? Of course, really the last 3 months being the heavy part. The first part was getting the office together, of course. I guess the ultimate question I have to ask you, what nationality are you?
I am Polish.
I don't need to tell you, I'm sure it's not news that a lot of people have told Polish jokes, you know, and I could tell you some right now, but I'd have to tell them kind of slowly, wouldn't I?
I don't understand that.
Okay. No, I'm pretty concerned with Poland. I read the paper every day, try to get international paper, saw where a large hole appeared in Warsaw, and they said the police were looking into it.
What did they find?
Not much. But seriously, the Polish people have long been the brunt of some really cruel jokes, I think, and I just wonder, what are your findings in that area?
Well, I have done a lot of studies on my people, and all of our research indicates that Polish people tend to be bright, perceptive, and highly intelligent.
Well, Dr. Kaczynski, you certainly are a living testimony of your own people, and I wish we could meet a couple more people like you. In fact, if we had 3 of you like you, we could change this light bulb. Appreciate you coming by, and we'll be right back after this important word.
What a sound.
What a sound for one guy. Sounds
yes,
like
sir.
2 or 3. Yeah. It's amazing. When 2 aren't playing. You know, what a show we've had tonight. Happy you really stood in there like a trooper. And Virgil, all the luck in the world with that jump. And how about that doctor? Huh? He really
It's interesting. I think he taught us something tonight.
That we're all really brothers no matter where we are. In fact, I feel a kind of warmth that I don't really want to say goodbye.
Barth, let's not say goodbye or good night. It's such a cliche.
Really, let's talk to everyone out there as best we can and just say aloha.
Au revoir.
Ciao.
Arrivederci.
Gesundheit.
Shalom.
Adios.
And, good night.
Good night.
Good night. Also appearing on tonight's show were Jim Varney as Virgil Sims and Zale Kessler as Dr. Emmanuel Kaczynski.
Oh. This episode took us into very awkward territories. We start with a single clarinet playing with a little bit of what sounds like tambourine or a cymbal. Happy Kine is alone, and the Mirthmakers are not there because they've taken a gig at a wedding, apparently paying better than being on Fernwood Tonight, which really gives an opportunity for a song Barth does love to play. He plays piano, as we saw in Mary Hartman, Mary Hartman, and apparently here guitar, so he's a talented showman. And he's got his Ode to Fernwood, which really did say what Fernwood is. Then we introduce Virgil Sims, who I didn't remember from Mary Hartman, but whom I did remember as being played by Jim Varney, or I didn't remember. that this character was played by Jim Varney, but I recognized Jim Varney pretty much immediately and waited till the end to make sure that that was correct. Jim Varney, if you weren't sure or don't recognize the name, he's better known as Ernest, who in my youth came up through a series of commercials for used cars and then worked his way into a series of feature films. And I can't necessarily keep track of all of the Ernest movies. I just did a quick IMDb, and it looks like there were at least 10, starting with, I believe, Ernest Goes to Camp in 1987, so 10 years after this. He also was the voice of one of the characters in the Toy Story series. That was the Slinky Dog. So that it might be a familiar voice to those of you in the younger generations and those of you who have a heart. So go see Toy Story if you haven't already. All of it. Even 4. Virgil is introduced as having known Charlie Haggers and Jody Troxell, so that mid-second season of Mary Hartman. I don't remember his character appearing in the series. In any case, Virgil Sims is a kind of Evel Knievel style character. Evel Knievel would be the famous daredevil of the mid-70s who was known for attempting to jump the Grand Canyon and other dangerous feats. There seemed to have been a real hot space for daredevil acts in the 1970s. I can name Evel Knievel, and I remember there was a comic book about this dude named the Human Fly who also did real dumb stunts. But, you know, it made for good television even when Evel Knievel himself failed. In the case of Virgil, however, he is jumping motorhomes, and exactly the way you think it, or the way I thought it, was that he would be jumping over motorhomes, but no, that's not the case. He is jumping the motorhome over something, and apparently there's photographic evidence of how that works. These are full motorhomes with water beds and, you know, other things installed. Typically, when you have a jumping vehicle, you'll take out as much weight as you can, but that is certainly not the plan. And then we go from the part where it goes from ick to awkward with Dr. Emmanuel Kaczynski, who is introduced as an anthropologist from Southern Ohio University, who is studying the root causes of racial prejudice. So it certainly is set up like we're going to see some serious thinking. But then it goes straight into all of the stereotypes associated with a variety of races. Those, I mean, I would certainly came up in this era. You know, I was alive when this show came on, and I may have, if I'd seen it at the time, may have laughed. I remember the Blanche Knott 100 Filthiest Jokes books. Like, there's a series of 5 or 6 of these awful race books. So many different racial stereotypes being mocked. That was the sense of humor in the 1980s. And here, I don't know that it's necessarily that we are mocking the races, but we're really skating on the edge of some very thin ice here with this character who is preparing to dismantle racial stereotypes, right, as a general field. And then in this discussion, you know, at first we think that Jerry is the one who's going to screw it all up because he brings up the word that he uses for the Italian folks. Apparently they're doing the equivalent of phrenology, where we would measure in, you know, at the 1800s, we would measure the heads of people of various races and use that as justification for the awful discussion of race that was happening at that point. But here, it almost seems like we're blowing up these stereotypes, right? Like, that this person who is ostensibly an authority on the subject is bringing it up as though it were real. That's the attack here, and I don't think that it is saying that. Again, it's easy to have the initial reaction, but I got to look a little bit past that just to kind of get where this is coming from. So the initial reaction is shock, because this is stuff we don't talk about. But then underneath it, I will also look at this and wonder why we're presenting it this way. And I know the 1970s was a time when a lot of humor was about exploring the edges of social propriety, right? We talked a little bit about that last week. the way that it starts with Italians and Jewish people and the Irish is sort of setting it up to say we are talking about everyone's race and that everyone has stereotypes associated with them. That's one way of attacking this bit. I know that in the few minutes I'm going to spend with you, we're not going to unpack it all. There is a lot to unpack here, though. So it starts with that. It starts with that attack against folks who more or less seem white. And then it talks about Chinese and Japanese folks, and then later to Latin and Spanish people, right, as they were called in the 1970s. It's sort of attacking things that we associate with the races and using pseudoscience, which is intentionally made up science. Like the fact that Chinese people have more resistance to water in their hands, making them more amenable to doing laundry jobs. There's a real history for why the Chinese people in America, the Chinese immigrants, ended up doing laundry. It was one of the few businesses that they could have in the early 20th century. So laundry and restaurants, those, I'm not trying to make fun of it. That's part of the history of the Chinese experience in America in the early 20th century, late 18th and early 20th century, and that leads to where we are here in the late 20th century. If you have any amount of awareness of any of the history of the things that are being referred to here, we can pick apart that it is clearly made up and intentionally made to help us poke fun at the stereotype. I'm not sure how much it succeeds for someone who isn't as aware. And that's a bit of a question, right? Like, so people who don't understand because of ignorance or other reasons how these things are false and how these stereotypes, while somewhat based in a kind of reality, aren't necessarily real, right? The perception and the reality are not in line here. In the end, I know that it's meant in humor. In the end, I can see that it isn't specifically trying to attack people. It does look like it's attacking the idea of stereotypes, and it's up to us now to talk about whether it works or not. I mean, I certainly had a reaction to it, so it works in that regard. That allows me to talk about some of the issues related to it. So if that is some kind of success, then I guess it succeeds in that way, at least in this very small platform. I don't know that that's exactly what you walk away from if you're not looking too deeply. So that's where we sit. And then it's time to review, right? And then Barth and Jerry spend a little bit of time reviewing what this show covered from their point of view, right? There's no part of me that says that Barth and Jerry are actually decent human beings. Like, they're likable to a certain extent. That's not the same as being good or decent. And I think that this show specifically sets them up that way. I don't believe that Barth is intended to be very likable. Generally, when we look at Barth, he's kind of staring away in disgust as though he deserves better than what he has in front of him, than what he is literally doing. He's likable, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we should like him, if that makes sense. So the end of this episode is a bit of a wrap-up. It's like looking at the guests that we've had, and eventually Barth comes to say goodbye to all of us in a variety of ways, including Gesundheit. This episode had some stirs in it. This one definitely got my brain thinking about some stuff. I hope that for you, you're thinking about some things too. I certainly would like to join a conversation that involves listening and reading people's thoughts, and hopefully we can be kind to each other, because this world is hard enough. Thank you so much for watching with me. Thank you so much for leaving your kind thoughts, feelings, and impressions down in the comments. Thank you so much for being you, and we will see you next week in Fernwood.